Welcome to The Informed. Joining me today are Sherelle Ainsley, Ryan Smith and Mario Beeks. Today, everybody, we're actually going to be talking about Australia's new ambassador for gender equality. She hit back at the offensive comments made by various people in the Twitter sphere about gender diversity and her appearance. She put up a video announcing her appointment as that new ambassador. Her name's Stephanie Copus Campbell. She's married to Defence Force Chief Angus Campbell. And she said that the reaction to her appointment and the comments made is proof about why her ambassadorship is in fact needed. And she's vowing to use the platform to proudly promote Australia's strong commitment to gender equality. So greetings, everybody. Let's get started with the question, is Stephanie Copus's ambassadorship for gender equality needed? And are we going too far with the appointment of a gender equality ambassador? And is it virtue signalling?
Who's going to be first then? Okay, shall I?
I'm happy to kick off if you like.
Thanks, Sherelle.
Look, I think not just in Australia, but pretty much internationally at the moment, there's this issue or this push for gender equality and gender diversity, I guess, as well. And for me, it's a little bit concerning. You know, I've got a son who's, growing up. He's a boy. I am a girl. And I don't have any issue with people who, see themselves as any other way. But I do have a little bit of an issue with it being pushed down my throat. And so I think my biggest concern with this is it feels like it's just another step in that direction. So I do think it is a bit trying to go down that work path. I think we've got so many issues in our communities at the moment that I would much rather see funds, resources directed in those directions rather than this one.
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of being told that our country is full of racists, homophobes, misogynists. Every second day there seems to be someone who's taking to social media telling us how bad we are and what a terrible nation we are. And I just don't buy it. I just think the average person is none of those things. In fact, they don't think about that. They get on with their daily life. They don't care your gender, your sexual persuasion, your anything. They just don't care. That's in the main. I think most people just want to know whether you're a good person or not. And I often say that we should be less focusing on characteristics and focusing on character, because anyone who's a minority, there are examples of really, really good people who are in minorities and really, really bad people in minorities, as there are in majorities. Just let's stop hammering ourselves as a nation, get back to being just the happy-go-lucky people that we were seen to be for decades.
Can I just add something? Thank you, Ryan. You just going to continue that one. Look, I'm in Australia for last 24 years, so I'm not born here. And the day when I arrived in Australia, I fall in love with everything. I mean, with everything. And, personally, as an immigrant, of course, I face some obstacles, that you're English and you're bald, you're fat, all these things. It's okay. You build yourself, you need to be, what I learned, that nothing's going to be given to me. You need to earn respect. You need to learn the culture and everything else. But one thing in Australia, it's a luck that people don't understand how lucky they are, honestly. I living and working in Sydney, as a Caroline says, there is the problem, with the men attacking women, but people in Australia, what is the goal of all these things? I sometimes feel that me as a man, I feel the problem to society, because everything's been telling me, the gender this, gender that, women this way, and I was like, what is a man only problem here? Australians, they don't know how lucky they are. Because if you go overseas and if the Australian media passes the news from overseas, they will see what racism is and how the government deal with that one here. Yeah, so that's my understanding.
I'm always concerned about new roles that are created because it has the potential to look like tokenism as well, which then actually sets a potential movement or a potential group of Australia's citizens being further marginalised. I'm also concerned about what is going to be the interaction between that ambassador role and, say, for example, the Australian Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commissioner. I'm actually pro that which can be embodied in law. Funny that, I'm a lawyer. So I'm not really sure outside the law what this ambassador is going to do. So just curious to hear from people whether you think there's overlap between those two roles. What is it? Are we looking at wokeism? Are we looking at tokenism? I'm not sure what this role is actually going to achieve.
Can I add on this one? As you know, guys, I spent 5 years in diplomacy. That's how I come to Australia. And, I was the head of intelligence for Croatian government here in Australia. I follow ambassador and everything else. And all this, when you're ambassador, it's not just a title itself, how to say, if someone can give you the title, you need to satisfy some international criteria, Geneva Convention, the Vienna Convention, anything else. And so title being ambassador, I think it's just more tokenism, as I said, Carlo, and then because I never saw that the international community actually created a role, ambassador, a role in gender equality. It's like, I think it's more like a, tokenism, as you say, yeah.
And I think extending that, I think being an ambassador in the way that I view it is to be a representative, to be almost celebrating Australia. And the disappointing thing is the very first presentation she's done internationally has been pretty much laughed at. So it's not a great start. And I find it very unusual that someone in that role wouldn't have some friend or colleague, probably more so, tapping her and saying, it's not a great video, let's do it again, let's reword it, or even looking at it yourself and saying, probably not at my best start. And to have such a disconnect between how it would be perceived and then being able to put it out there, to me doesn't sound like a very great character or style to be an ambassador.
Yeah, I like what you said at the beginning of that, Sherelle, by saying that should be someone that celebrates things, because, there's no question over the journey there's been a disparity between men and women, and that's not great. And I think we've gone great steps to actually address a lot of it. So I think in saying that an ambassador should be there to celebrate and highlight some issues, talk about the advances that we've made over time, temper that with some realities of today as well. But the reality is, as I said, most people, I don't know that the pay gap's been addressed, maybe not fully, but it has been addressed to a point. I think most people, certainly what I see from my kids, as young adults, they don't really see any difference between male and female in terms of what their ability is, anything like that. So, celebrate the advances. And as Mario said, you can go to a lot of other countries where women are treated terribly. And by comparison, our problems are, although not insignificant, marginal compared to those other countries.
Ryan, I'll stay with you for the moment because she also said in that video, she said gender equality was central to Australia's diplomatic, economic and regional security. What do you think about that as an opening comment about what her ambassadorship is going to achieve?
I think it's an incredibly long bow, and as someone who's been in politics for 16 years, I haven't seen that gender inequity has been a matter that would affect any of those issues. Is it better if we have diversity in those areas? Sure. But, we also want competent people. I refer to the by-election we're going to have here in Melbourne in the seat of Aston, which Alan Tudge resigned from. The leaders, my state leader, the federal leader, got to have a woman. Sure, let's have a woman. Let's have a competent woman, because not all women in politics are, and not all men in politics are either. But the people of Aston have voted for a man for some time now, and clearly, to my mind, they want someone who's going to represent their views and represent their causes rather than picking a male or a female.
And we know from history that is a vitally important seat. It certainly helped John Howard out in days gone by. So it's really going to signal to the rest of the political sphere where it's heading. Are we in fact going further down the Labor rabbit hole, or will Liberals be able to regroup and take a bit of faith from the result in that by-election?
There's some really good, if I can just put a full stop on that one, there's some really good women who are putting their hands up for that role. but the message from the Liberal Party to its members is men need not apply. I'm not sure that's a good message.
Well,
And I agree, it
that's the
should be the
pendulum
best
swing.
person.
Sorry, Sherelle, isn't that the pendulum swing? And Sherelle, you would have seen policy and decisions being made where you literally see things going back to the bad old days and the pendulum swinging.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It should be the right person that's going to represent that. And that's not just in gender, it's also in any other quota that we're trying to fill. We should be looking at the best person for that job and for that role to represent the people, and that should be how it should be appointed. I've had my professional career and I've been a female, and I believe I've done very well in that. And a lot of those industries that I worked in were very male dominated. And I cannot recall one time where I felt like, oh, I was being not listened to or anything like that because I was a female. I think if you want to feel that way, you can find an excuse to feel that way. But if you actually just go into every meeting with good intentions and go in with, you know, all of your skills to offer to, you know, the community or to that business, I think you'll actually see that it's not, people aren't really putting people down. As Ryan said earlier, we should just be looking at the individuals and the competence, not necessarily their gender, their race, or anything else.
There's that fabulous expression, cream always rises to the top.
Yep.
And you can have that mental framework where, you know, I can't achieve because of this, that, or the other. And I think the Australia we want is an Australia where everybody can be their best selves. If there were a serious problem in relation to gender diversity, for example, I'm a bit of a fan of Kate Jenkins, who's the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commissioner. And she's done amazing work, and she's worked with male ambassadors, for example. She comes from the same background as me. She's a lawyer, and she worked out very quickly you have to take people on the whole journey and understand why it's good for business, why it's good for individuals, employees, and organisations as a whole to get on board with gender equality concepts. So great work's already being done. I'm just not sure about what this adds to the equation. Mario, I'm interested, given your background, in relation to the comment about recognising gender diversity, and presumably that's concepts beyond binary, leading to regional security, for example. Do you think that's a stretch too far?
No, look, absolutely. Look, I know the little insights because I spend the time in diplomacy. So, you know, like, how are you going to educate China on the gender equality, or Indonesia, Muslim country? You know, what are you going to do? Put them on a wrong foot and tell them, you know, you don't following gender equality or whatever it is, or China. How this role is going to influence actually security? I don't think so. It can influence whatsoever. You know, I mean, in the first place, instead of this, I think can put the relationship in a different direction, because it's like, you know, calling other countries that aren't doing enough, you know, and taking yourself as example, it can put actually those countries, are we depending on these countries, China, Indonesia, you know, I mean, we are island nation, and, you know, we are fast stretched with everything to now put that gender equality in somebody else, you know, I mean, daily life, like a China, and they're going to say like, we have no time for this. They don't want it, because most of the countries, they don't care, you know, I mean, what other country thinks. That's diplomat. They're shaking heads, and they go back into the office and they send a report, we blah blah blah, this, and that's how the things are done. So, like, I just wanted something else as well on topic of Australia, why people should be happy. I never met country, and you please correct me, in any country in the world, that you can be immigrant and you can talk on your language in the government services. Like, when I come to Australia, it's like, that's one of these equalities. You can go anywhere in this country and ask interpreter or get a paperwork printed on your language. Try to come in Croatia. You don't know Croatian? I'm sorry, man. You know, I mean, just simply doesn't work that way. And then nobody care. You know, I mean, you can be rich, you can be this and that. That's a racism, and there's no quality, nothing else. In Australia, people get everything. So I don't understand these complaints. Seriously, me personally.
Are we missing a very marginalised group in our community that doesn't feel understood, recognised, welcomed? I'm not sure about that. You know, I have a friend in a workplace. He calls it a sheltered workshop. where there is somebody who is trans and identifies as female, everybody's learned her name. She hasn't bothered to learn their names. It's sort of a situation that makes him feel incredibly uncomfortable because he was marginalised as a gay man growing up. And he said, I don't understand what's happened to the world. So for somebody from a marginalised group looking at another marginalised group and seeing a completely different set of treatments, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's showing that, you know, we are stepping in the right direction, or, you know, is the pendulum swinging too far? That's one of the points. When you look at the tweets that were posted, there's a couple of themes. I think one is very lowbrow and pretty much unacceptable, but there is an interesting twist that I want us to discuss. A lot of it was focused on her appearance and just how she looked. You know, we've got very cautious about commenting on people's appearance, size, colour, whatever. We forget, of course, that with everything we do in life, particularly when you're putting yourself out there in the public arena, and I think Ryan and Sherelle definitely understand what I'm talking about now, you are in sales. Sure. And there's a theory that we're all in sales. Sherelle said, where was the friend to say, let's repackage this, let's reshoot it? So I know that this is a delicate area for us to be treading into because it is that sort of potentially personally attacking someone. I know we won't. A lot of the tweets were very lowbrow, were that lowbrow attack. But is there some truth to the rumour that appearance matters?
100%. I mean, particularly if you're in a role that's representing others, it ceases to be about you. If you're an ambassador or a member of parliament or whatever, you've got to wake up every day and say, I'm representing other people. In my case, I'm representing my community or my party or parliamentarians more broadly. You know, you've got to put out an appearance and a I want to say style, it's not the right word, but I guess a persona that speaks to authority and speaks to actually being a representative of other people. And, you know, if you're representing a wide portion of people who think that you probably aren't looking your best, then you've got to take that into account. The simple phrase is exactly what I said, is it's not about you when you represent others.
And look, Ryan's got a wealth of experience in this area, and I'm very new to it, right? We're talking 6-8 months maybe, and I was able to go that journey. I would do things, I would ask for feedback. I got people to give me pointers. Am I doing it well? I don't know, but I am always trying to improve, because I do know, as you said, I was wanting to be elected as a representative for Nepean. So I have to show them and give them confidence and put my best foot forward. And this is a role which is an Australian-based role where there is a wealth of resources. I didn't have a wealth of resources. So if I'm able to achieve that with the wealth of resources that she has, why wasn't she taking those up?
Because why should she change for other people?
Look, but you need to, you know, as I said this at the beginning, it is not what you believe about yourself. It is not what the people, you know, the citizens of this country think about her. This is the public image, as the Calvin says. This is public video, and you have the role and the title of ambassador, regardless what your husband it is. You know, I mean, the defense force, whatever. That doesn't make sense whatsoever. But once when you reach this public threshold that you have been seen beyond the borders of your country, then you're representing Australia. And how the people perceive that ambassador, that lady, you know, I mean, overseas, that's the question. Australians, yeah, we have ambassador for equality, this and that. But how the world stage perceive her, that's the question we should have.
But I've seen other photos of her that she looks not like it's not, this is not a personal attack on her. This is just, there's things that you can do to make yourself look more presentable on camera. And you do that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, look, I know that feeling. I have the mirror every morning. I say to myself, my God, yeah. But you're right. It's not personal attack, but she's representing Australia across the border. So yes.
So a lot of those comments, of course, came from the USA, and some of them came from Donald Trump. So it is that case of, we're selling a role, we're selling a proposition. I've also made the point about, is this a replication of a role that already exists? Is there something about that role that is lacking, which then leads to a lot of the comments about the use of taxpayer money. So I dare say, Ryan, you've got a view about how do we use resources most effectively, and how do you avoid double up? Before I throw to you, Ryan, what I found really interesting when I went to the United Kingdom to talk about legislative change there, they have to run an assessment to see if they're polluting. It's a term whereby they have to work out, are they stepping on the toes of any other entity that is already performing that role? Is it a duplication? Is it leading to a cost impost on government that is not warranted? So again, that they have to do that analysis in order to be able to do the sales pitch. So I'm sitting here as a taxpayer. I don't mind paying taxes if our community is housed, educated, has access to health, fresh water, whatever. What I do resent is where lilies are being gilded and there may be duplication in a role, because I'm sitting here as semi-educated, semi-informed, and I'm not understanding the value proposition to me as a taxpayer. So Ryan, I'm interested to hear your views.
Yeah, look, I'm in complete agreement with you in terms of there being overlap in this role and many others. I mean, here in Victoria, we've seen the growth of the public service by over 30% in the last 8 years. And a lot of that is authorities like the North East Link Authority, the Victorian School Buildings Authority, the Health Buildings Authority. These are all, these new agencies are taking on roles that departments used to do. And I don't think we've got a better result by having a new authority in place. They're designed to put buffers between the government and the people. And they're designed so that the government can say, we're getting independent work and advice done by the authority because they're the authority, right? So they're the authority. And so we get this situation where we have got this massive overlap and expenditure from the public purse that is completely unwarranted, because things worked better, may I say, when we didn't have them. And in this particular situation, I agree with you. Again, the commissioner's doing the job. You don't need an ambassador going out there spruiking their own views, pretending that things are worse than they are, all these other things. I mean, I'm like you. I don't mind paying taxes either. I don't mind paying taxes for the betterment of our society, and I don't mind paying taxes for people who are disadvantaged to get support. But when someone's being paid from my taxes to blow their own horn on an issue that other bodies are already looking at, then I think it's a total waste of money, and I'm not sure, it is just virtue signalling. That's plain and simple.
Well, I put my whole campaign when I was running down here, and my whole base was everything should be done based on merit. And when you look at different projects across the country, in this instance, and it was state for us, we should look at all the projects, and then we really have to fund what we really, really need. Like you were saying, Caroline, housing, food, water, those sorts of essentials. And I really do believe that a lot of projects are not being done based on merit. They're being based on either, wokeism, or it could be on trying to get re-elected, those sorts of things. And I agree. I do not want to be using my taxpayer money to be funding that. I want things done based on merit.
Look, the history shows, I see this differently. History shows when you have the parallel government, it's easy to control by the one person who's in the power. And, seeing that dual duplications and blue carbon copies, it's nothing else actually to suit somebody who's in the power. That's how I see it from the risk and intelligence point of view. And that's history showed, when you have the double, as Ryan says, where the Human Rights Commissioner here, where the Ambassador for Gender Equality, and they're both talking same but different. So we need to, if we want to go past the message, to the public, and beyond the borders of Australia, first we need to put those two entities to agree on the messaging, which is very difficult. So instead of that comes the key person on top and say, this is the message for the public. So I think that this is a deliberate and purposely creating double roles, so the high echelon can easier to control and monitor and execute power.
I also reflect just generally on Kate Jenkins going into her role, because she'd already done a lot of the groundwork in the community generally. So she was able to garner and take people with her on that journey. So even by the time that she acknowledged the role that she was stepping into, she'd already developed that groundswell of support, understanding, people being listened to, heard, respected. So there was, you talk about some appointments being a cause for celebration. Hers was one of them. Merit, as Cheryl said, make sure that it's meritorious, make sure that they've got the skill set. Going back to what Ryan was saying in relation to who's going to replace Tudge, or who's going to stand in that electorate. Vitally important that we focus on merit, vitally important that it's actually filling a need. And so I just want to cycle back to, is there in fact a need for this role at all? And I think we've canvassed that very well today. Final comments before we wrap up.
I think that you're right. I think if people are credentialed when they go into these roles, then Australians can sit back and say, I see what that person's been doing. I see what they're trying to do going forward. But I've been trying to place a woman and a 4-year-old daughter in a house for a year, and the government has basically run her around in circles. When people like her have a home, then you can start appointing who you want to various roles. But there is a need that is greater that's not being met, and it goes across homelessness, it goes across substance abuse, a whole range of things. Get that right before you go off on a frolic.
And I agree. And I think that one of these things with appointing these roles is almost like a distraction, so that we've got all these major issues that are happening, and yet this is like a distraction off to the side, so we don't have to talk about the major issues or the main issues that we should be talking about. And so I would like to see these distractions, in my view, eliminated, so that we can focus on the real issues. That's what our taxpayer money is there for. That's what all of our elected officials are elected for. So let's get back to those basics. That's my view.
I agree with Ryan, with Cheryl as well. I think Australia has every tools, every department for many, many decades. Maybe just need to change some legislation, maybe be more productive. But I feel like Australia has so many things already in working order. I don't understand why we need to create more of these roles, because it's confusing. It's confusing.
Thanks very much, Mario Beeks,
Thank
Cheryl Ainsley, and Ryan Smith for joining us on The Informed today. I'm Caroline Council, your host.